big body for volunteering in New South Wales. Grow communities and bring people together through volunteering.
Hi everyone, my name is Ben Hillier and I will be your host on this episode. Today I'm talking with Ivan Wong from CASS about volunteer management. Today we're talking with Ivan Wong from CASS about managing volunteers and volunteer recruitment. Ivan received his Bachelor of Social Science degree from the Chinese University of Hong Kong and a certificate in education from the Hong Kong University. Currently, he's the General Manager of Strategic Support of CASS. Ivan has 20 years' experience working with volunteers, managing volunteers and promoting volunteering in his different positions at CASS. Ivan has special interests in developing volunteers from a CALD background and supporting well-aged people to volunteer in community development and participation activities. This episode will cover National Standards 1, 2, 3 and 4 of the volunteering framework and give you some practical ideas as to how your organisation can meet these standards and strengthen your volunteering practice. Ivan, would you like to introduce yourself and give us a brief overview of your work relating to volunteers?
My name is Ivan Wong. As introduced by Ben, I am the General Manager Strategic Support of CASS. CASS is an organization that was established in 1981. And since then, we have been providing a very wide range of services, from community services like childcare to aged care. At present, we serve more than 7,000 families every week. And I'm very pleased to be in this organization and work together with a very fantastic group of volunteers in the provision of the services to the community.
Fantastic. So tell me about how volunteers fit into the work you do at CASS. What sort of roles do you have volunteers doing?
Well, in CASS, we believe in volunteering, and we believe that volunteers can be in every position in our organization. So even though for some work that many people think that got to be done by paid staff members, if we identify people who have the skill and who are willing to contribute, we welcome them to join us to increase our resources to support the community. At present, of course, our board, they are all volunteers. So they make the decisions, determine the vision, the culture, value of the whole organization. And then down to the operation of the daily provision of services, we have volunteers in almost all work areas of CASS.
Right. So roughly how many volunteers do you engage to support the work you do?
At present, CASS as a whole has more than 350 regular volunteers.
Wow.
Who help in the operation of our day-to-day activities. And they support about 700 staff members that our organization employs to work together to support the community.
Fantastic. Tell me a little bit about the types of people you have as volunteers. Are there particular demographics, particular skill sets that your volunteers tend to have?
Well, the overwhelming majority of our volunteers are people from multicultural background, like Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and a lot of them are seniors. Yeah, especially right. Those who just got retired, but still want to contribute and involve in the community. But we do have a little number of young people who help in our services, like people who are still in university, some young people who just entered into workforce. So there are all sorts of people who are volunteering in our service now.
Right. What's your experience managing both the younger people and the seniors? Do they work together? Are there particular challenges that those age groups have?
Well, for the younger volunteers, I think we have to work with them in a bit different way. Now, say if we work together with the seniors, a lot of the seniors people, they hold similar cultural background or language abilities like our staff members. So right. In a way, they can work together more smoothly. But for the young people, a lot of them are educated here locally. So to them, English is not a problem, but the way that they think will be very different from our staff members and other volunteers. The cultural gap between the two generations can be very big because those people who were brought up in China, in Hong Kong, really have a very different way of thinking from those who are educated and brought up locally in Australia here. And that's something that we need to deal with to make sure that we work together well. Yeah.
Right. What sort of things do you do to make that a smooth relationship?
I think we emphasize a common vision to contribute to the community. Even though we may think in a way which is different, but we keep communicate. We try our best to use the things that we are similar. Because even though people maybe who are young, who brought up locally, they still know a little bit about our culture. So we will grab those minor little things and try to bring them together.
Right. Okay, cool. And are there any particular challenges you see to working with volunteers in that culturally and linguistically diverse community and the multicultural community?
I think at present, a lot of people in the multicultural communities, they have some difficulties in volunteering. Yeah, because of their language barrier and cultural differences. And on this regard, I think we are in an advantage to recruit and develop the volunteers because the services that we provide or the target recipient of the services, they are from the same culture and speak the same language as the volunteers that we use. And from this angle, I think we are in an advantageous position to help those volunteers to overcome the challenges that they have to volunteer. And I think that for other service providers, I'll encourage their volunteer managers to, well, take a more open mind to break the barriers which stops people from volunteering. Because there's really some hurdle that people face if the volunteers from the multicultural community want to volunteer in the mainstream.
Right. And what sort of things are you able to do to overcome those hurdles where you've got your multicultural volunteers working in the more mainstream Western Australian society?
I think for us, the challenge that we have is sometimes, well, we have volunteers from different backgrounds. Sometimes they come together, like the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Koreans. So under these kind of situations, what we always emphasize is the kind of acceptance, working together. We are all Australians to promote this kind of multicultural value that can be shared by the volunteers.
Right. That sounds absolutely fantastic. So how do you recruit volunteers and then keep them volunteering?
For the recruitment of volunteers, because CASS runs a lot of activities, and through our activities and programs, we reach a lot of people. Because at present, we reach over 7,000 families every week through our different services. So through our own activities and programs, we are able to reach a lot of people. And because of that relationship, in a way, it's easier for us to recruit the volunteers. But of course, we also openly recruit volunteers, say, from our media promotion, through our social media platform or through the radio, television. And we also involve in a lot of community events like Lunar New Year celebration, information stores. So through the participation in these activities, we promote volunteering and we put the volunteers there.
Right. And do you receive any funding to support your volunteers?
Well, on and off, we got small one-off grants to enable us to do some volunteering work, especially in volunteer training. So there is a bit of support, I can say, but at the same time, the fundings are not always there.
Yep.
There's no guarantee. And there is, in a way, it stops our long-term planning because funding is not stable. So these are also challenges that we are facing.
Right. So you have to, you get funding for, say, 6 months to a year, and that's great. But when it runs out, you kind of, how do you keep things going when you haven't got that funding?
Yeah, I think that's something that the government need to consider.
Hmm.
And they provide funding to support organizations like us to develop volunteers and promote volunteering.
Yeah, very much agree. But when you don't have that funding, how do you keep your volunteer programs going? Are there any particular strategies you use?
Well, for us, if in a particular year we really cannot get enough funding to support our work in developing volunteers, we use our own resources
Right.
to support this kind of work. Yeah, because for CASS, we are quite a sizable organization, and sometimes we are able to have surplus from the operation of some services. Because we are a non-profit organization, we invest those profits or surplus into further community building or social capital development. And that's why we can have some resources. If in a certain year we really cannot get funding, we can still do some work in promoting volunteering.
Right. Fantastic. So what do you think are the most important skills for you as a volunteer manager?
Well, I think for a person who manage volunteers, the main skill is more on the governance or developing the system for volunteers. Because during my past 20 odd years in CASS, I've been involved in different roles in working with volunteers, like from the front line to the middle manager to my current position. But I think that a good system is very important for volunteer managers. A good system in your organization which treasures or values volunteers, a culture of using volunteers, developing volunteers. And the manager also need to explain to everyone very clearly about the benefits of volunteering and provide the guidelines. And preferably those guidelines got to be written, policies and procedures. So the role of the manager is to make sure that all these kind of background information, the governance, the system, they are all in place. And then the people who really work with volunteers can know the direction to follow and know how to work with the volunteers.
Right, definitely. So how do you sort of support your volunteers developing when they're in volunteering roles for you?
Well, in our situation, we emphasize a lot on training. Yeah, and we believe that is extremely important because through the training, we can let the volunteers know what we are expecting on them. Like, we really take it serious for volunteers. We have really demands on them in the same way like a staff member, like a paid staff member. And this kind of common understanding must be there. And therefore, we organize induction trainings. We organize ongoing trainings like leadership training. And then depending on the work area they have, we also have trainings like WHS. So we will have this kind of training to make sure that the volunteers can fit into our work.
Right. And you mentioned that your volunteers do a lot of work supporting the paid staff at CASS. How do you, as a volunteer manager, make sure there's that balance, that your volunteers aren't just sort of being used to do paid work without being paid? How do you balance that to look after your volunteers?
Well, at present, there is a lot of services that are not funded by the government at all. Yeah. So sometimes we will have limited staff resources to lead or develop the services. Then volunteers can come in. Say, for example, we are now running more than 30 activity groups for the seniors people. And these groups are for the well-aged people who maybe just retired, who are still active, healthy, and can move around. And for this group of people, there is not much government funding. The government funding goes to support the frail seniors who have mobility issues, who have health issues. So for this kind of healthy aged people, there is limited paid staff manpower who can do the work, organize the daily activities. Then the volunteers will come in. We will organize them into committees. They will decide their day-to-day activities. They manage their own finance and organize like the daily programs, excursions, how they involve in the community. So these are the ways that the work of the volunteers complement or add value to the work of the paid staff members.
Right. So you give your volunteers that bit of flexibility to work out how they want to be involved and recognize that they're doing it as volunteer kind of thing.
Yeah, and they work under a system.
Yep.
Because we have some guidelines to them, like what is the role of the management committee, what is the role of the president, to make sure that everyone is following a certain kind of rule when they provide the service.
Right. Fantastic. And do you find that as a volunteer manager, there are any particular challenges that you often have to address when you're working with your volunteers?
Well, I think the challenges that I face mainly lies in two areas. One is the lack of resources that we have. As I just mentioned, the government has only limited support to volunteering. Yeah. So in a way, I have to face this shortage of resources when I do the work in volunteering. And then the other issue I face is about the staff. And I think developing the culture and the belief in volunteering is very important. Yeah. I don't know whether it also applies to other mainstream organizations, but for us, I really find that it's always an issue. The main reason is that even though for some of the staff members, they don't really know or identify with the value of volunteering.
Right.
Some people may not think that volunteers can help. Some people may think that volunteers can only do less important work. And worst of all, I'll say that a lot of staff members think that developing volunteers takes too much time. And some even may think that it's a waste of time to develop volunteers because volunteers may come and go. You train up one volunteers and then suddenly they may say that, oh, I find a job, I want to leave. So sometimes there are this kind of situation that I'm facing to deal with the feelings of the volunteers. And all I can tell them or share with them is the positive experience in developing volunteers. I totally agree that sometimes we really need to put up a lot of effort. And sometimes they will be unstable. But if you don't try, you can never have good volunteers who can help you. And if you are able to get those volunteers, I can always say that volunteers are always more committed than paid staff members. If you get the right person, their commitment is so strong that, well, even paid staff members will not have that kind of involvement or commitment in that provision of services. So the value or contribution by volunteers can be very great. But everyone needs to bear in mind that you have to spend some time, some effort in order to make it happen. But it is worth trying. It's worth trying. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Ivan. Well, that brings us to the last question. Is there anything else around these topics you'd like to comment on?
Well, I think that as a migrant, I really like the volunteering culture in Australia. When I first come here, actually it's near the Olympic time.
Right.
When Sydney has the Olympic Games. And at that time, the experience is really shocking to me. There are so many volunteers everywhere happy to run the game. Yeah. And I really feel that, well, the volunteering tradition in Australia is that strong. And with my continuous work with the volunteers in my workplace here, I also think that volunteering is something very important. It not only helps or benefits the organization to increase their manpower, it is also a way that people in community can participate, can integrate, and work with everyone else together for the benefit of the community. And while doing this, we can also share our values, share our culture, and make sure that we are living in a really harmonious multicultural community.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ivan, for your expertise and your insight. What can people do if they want to find out more about CASS?
Well, we have a website And we welcome people to visit our website to see the services that we are doing, see how our volunteer contribute, and how to volunteer in our services. The address is www.cass.org.au.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again for your time. I hope the listeners have found today's show interesting and enlightening, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Voices of Volunteering, presented by the Centre for Volunteering. For resources, tools, training and news, head over to our website volunteering.com.au.